guys, it's Haley and welcome to another bookish video. Today I'm going to be talking about my most disappointing reads of 2022. If you missed it, yesterday I posted my most surprising reads of 2022. And in that video, I went over all of the books that I had kind of low to mid expectations for that just so highly exceeded them. And in this video, we're going to be doing the opposite, going over books that I had kind of high expectations for that kind of let me down. I have another 12 books to share with you guys, but before we get into the recommendations, or not so recommendations, I do want to thank the sponsor of today's video, which is Shortform. You guys know I have talked about Shortform before. I absolutely love them. Let me tell you a little bit about who they are. So Shortform is an app that does condensed book summaries and analysis. If you're interested in reading a book and finding out just a little bit more about it before you go in, Shortform is a great place to read a small synopsis to know kind of the main points of the book. If you want to use it for a paper or some kind of analysis, they also have a little bit of extra analysis in there. It's not just a straight summary. And it's also a great reference to remind yourself of the points of some of your favorite books. I think this is really, really helpful for their nonfiction books. Obviously, we read nonfiction books, we take note, and we're like, oh my God, this is so great. But then you put the book down and it's hard to recall all of those points. So reminding yourself of the main points of some of your favorite nonfiction books is readily available on Shortform. They have many categories. General fiction books are on there as well, but I really like the self-help, psychology books that they have on there, as well as the art and design section. I've been kind of dabbling in there and it's very interesting. It's a great way to inform your reading taste, and you can kind of test drive a book before you pull the trigger and buy it, or to remind yourself of the best parts of the books that you love after you've already read them. Here is my currently reading list. I always love looking at The Work by Nicole LaPera. That one is my favorite one. It's a book that I reference a lot in my practice and use to inform treatment plans with my clients, so just getting that quick refresher is so helpful. If you want to try out Shortform, you can use my link down below to get that money off. I will have them linked down below. It should be on the screen right now. Go ahead and check out Shortform if any of this sounds interesting to you, or you can gift it to a book-loving friend during the holiday season. Thank you so much to Shortform for sponsoring this video, and now let's go ahead and get into my disappointing reads. Now, obviously, when I talk about books that I rated low or that didn't measure up to my expectations, I feel like it goes without saying that that's just my personal opinion, and this channel is all about my own personal opinions on books, so please do not take this as a personal attack. If you love these books, if you feel like I shouldn't have been disappointed by these books, that is just too bad. You're allowed to have your opinion, and I'm also allowed to have mine, so please don't start a war with me in the comments. I promise you commenting down below is not going to change my opinion, and I think the world will go on if we have two differing opinions about a book, so you know what? Just don't waste either of our time. Got it? Cool. I'm going to start out with the books that I enjoyed a big portion of the book, but then let me down at the end. I feel like that is the most disappointing part, especially when you're reading a thriller and everything's kind of leading up to the end and that big twist and it doesn't come through. So my first disappointing read in this section is An Honest Lie by Taryn Fisher. I was so excited to read this one because I actually found it early. I think my Barnes & Noble just randomly put it out on the shelves a week early. So I read this book before anyone else. I was very excited to get into it and be one of the first opinions. And unfortunately, my opinion was a pretty negative one because I sat through the entire book only to get to the synopsis on the back at the 20% mark. I was waiting for this stuff the entire time, and when we finally got to it, it just was so disappointing. It did not measure up even a percentage of what I wanted it to and what the back cover made it sound like it was going to be giving us. In this story, we're following a girl named Rainey who is just sick of living in her little suburban town. She's fed up with all of the catty suburban women around her. But of course, she's so rich, and her rich, hot husband has this wonderful job, and she just has this horrible life, and oh, boo-hoo. So she's one of those rich people drama thriller characters that we just love to hate. And she reluctantly goes on a Vegas trip with these catty women in her suburban neighborhood. It just so happens that a lot of her childhood trauma took place in the desert around Las Vegas, where she grew up in a cult. So all of that is being triggered. We follow a dual timeline of her in present day on this Vegas trip, feeling like her past is coming back to haunt her, with chapters interspersed of the past of her growing up in the cult. And this whole like twisted, shocking journey with blackmail and a text message of her past coming back to haunt her, it literally comes in 3/4 into the book. So I was excited for this to start happening right when I opened the book, and it just took too much of an investment. It was a real big disappointment. It was boring. You can skip it. Next up, we have a very different trajectory for another thriller that came out this year, and that is All I Want by Darcy Bell. This one I loved. I was going to give a 5-star up until the last 2 pages. If we're going to talk about crushing disappointment, that's gotta be this. So in All I Want, we're following a woman who moves into a house in the country, and she's ready to live this little country bumpkin life. She's kind of built this idealist life up in her head about what living in this house will be like. She's pregnant, so she's kind of nesting and getting ready for her baby to come, but haunting things start happening to her there, and it's even more scary when she finds this old decrepit diary in the house and she figures out what happened in the past in this location. The writing style is so beautiful. It is like haunting, and it sucks you right in. It's fast paced. You want to find out what's going on in this house. I don't even like haunted house books, but I was fully invested in this. I think it was the empathy that I had for our main character and the way that she relates to the reader in this masterful way. I cannot speak enough to the writing style in this book. It is beautifully written, and the thriller plot is crafted so well. It has these back-to-back-to-back twists at the end that had me shook. I was so ready to give this 5 stars, and then I read the epilogue and I was like, are you kidding me? I gave it a 1-star rating. Can you believe that? I mean, that is the biggest disappointment ever when I'm reading this, getting ready to rave about a new 5-star book, and then that last twist hit and I was like, no, I know you're kidding. But Miss Darcy was not kidding, and she really wrote that, and it was so disappointing. I could not believe that that last twist left me feeling so bleh about the rest of the book. It was a great reading experience otherwise. I would say if you want to read this, just rip out the epilogue and pretend it doesn't exist. You will have a 5-star time. Another big disappointment is another contemporary thriller that did not come out in 2022, but I read in 2022, and that is He Started It by Samantha Downing. This follows a group of siblings who are going on a road trip to collect the inheritance from their grandfather who's passed away, but along the way, all of these family secrets start coming out. The book built really great suspense over the first 75 to 80%, but it was kind of a similar thing to An Honest Lie, where I was ready for this massive, punchy ending, and it just didn't give it to me. It felt confused. It felt a little meandering. It felt like Samantha Downing didn't know exactly in which direction she wanted to go with it. So it just left me feeling confused as the reader. It did that thing where it had piled on twist back to back to back to back, and I didn't even have time to process one thing before the next thing happened. So I just kind of felt lost in the shuffle. It was pretty disappointing to invest so much time and care for these characters to then not get that payoff at the end. And my last book in this category was The Club by Ellery Lloyd. This follows a exclusive club for rich people. And I'm not just talking about like rich people drama. No. Like these are the top of the 1%. I'm talking like Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, celebrities, Kanye West, like these type of people belong to the club. but it has a dark underbelly that nobody quite knows about unless you're flown into this world. We follow the creators of the club and some of the members as we uncover the dark secrets, and that all sounds really interesting, right? I love the premise. I thought it was so intriguing because, like, you know, shit like this is real. Like, something like this is happening in real life. But it was so painfully boring and painfully slow that I just lost interest about halfway through, and the twist at the end was so underwhelming because I just didn't care for the majority of the book. I was so disappointed that that twist wasn't shocking to me at the end because it lost me at the 50% mark. I think if this book was half as short and double the action, it would have been great plot-wise. As it was just written very, very dryly, and that was the main issue that I had. So it got a pretty low rating from me, and I was pretty disappointed. Also really disappointed to see that this is a Reese's book club pick, because I think a lot of thrillers that have this little seal on it are more widely picked up, and I just hate that people are running around picking up this book when it's so painfully boring compared to the vast majority of thrillers that I read this year. My next little section of books that I want to talk about are all disappointing reads that I still rated pretty high. Like, I'm talking between 3 and 4 stars, but something about it was just very disappointing to me. Maybe I set my expectations too high and it's a personal thing, but either way, I just felt like some kind of crushing disappointment when I read these books. The first one is another 2022 thriller, and that is My Summer Darlings by May Cobb. I didn't hate this book, okay? I think I rated it 3 stars, and it was a fun, vibey time for the summer. It had that rich people drama atmosphere that I love. It takes place in a small Texas town, so it was perfect for me. We were just following these women as they are all intrigued by this mysterious, sexy stranger who moves into their suburb. And little do they all know that every single one of them has this separate individual relationship with him that they think is a secret, but he's this dangerous person, and they all get caught in his web, but they don't know that everyone else is caught in his web. Sounds very, very interesting, but the plot was just really convoluted, and a lot of it I felt like wasn't shocking at all. Like, I kind of knew what was going to happen the entire plot of the book, and it also really similarly follows another plot of a book that I gave 4.5 out of 5 stars, so I couldn't help but directly compare those two. I don't want to give away what that book is as to not spoil this one or that book. If you heard that premise and you're reminded of a pretty popular horror book, just know that there are some pretty stark similarities, but that one has so much of a more compelling story and writing style, and this one just felt a little flat for me. So that was disappointing after reading May Cobb's release from last year, loving it so much and giving it 5 stars. My next book in this category is Notes on an Execution by Danya Kukafka, and I know what you're thinking, Haley, you literally rated this 4 stars and raved about it. What do you mean? This is a case of, I think I just had my expectations set a little too high. I saw so many of my friends and creators on BookTube giving this 5 stars and saying it was their favorite of the year. So I went in with crazy high expectations, and this is a pretty quiet novel, so it didn't measure up for me. I didn't think it was a bad book at all. I actually highly, highly recommend this book, but it just didn't live up to what I was wanting, which was very disappointing for me. I was ready for this wild, twisty, crazy time, and what I got was something much quieter and understated, and it's a story that, I'm sorry, I feel like it's been told before, just not in this way. And I do think that it's a creative take on the story structure. I can see that and appreciate it for what it is and applaud it for that and highly recommend it, but it doesn't change the fact that I think I've heard this commentary before quite a few times and maybe better. Again, I love this book. I had a wonderful time reading it. My expectations were just set a little too high. Also, I don't think I gave a synopsis. I totally forgot to do that. This is following the life of a man who is on death row. He's literally about to be executed, and we're following his life and all of the violence that he perpetuated against women through the eyes of the women in his life. It is pretty intense, pretty heartbreaking, but a very real and visceral story. I think if you are down for something more slow-paced and beautifully written rather than shocking, you will love this one. My next book in this category is Electric Idol by Katie Robert, and I loved their first book in this series. Neon Gods was in my last video where I talked about my most surprising reads of 2022. So I think the follow-up fell victim to the same thing that Notes on an Execution did, where I was just so hyped up that I had this unrealistic expectation of what this book was going to be, and so it kind of let me down and left me feeling really disappointed when it didn't measure up to that idea. Neon Gods was so hot, the tension was so high, and Electric Idol was just more of like a sweet romance to me. Now, don't get me wrong, this is still a pretty smutty book, but nothing to the level of Neon Gods, in my opinion. In this book, we are following a fantasy romance retelling of the story of Eros and Psyche. Psyche is the sister of Persephone, who we followed in the first book that I love so much, Neon Gods. So her sister just gets her own love story with this like perfect prince of a man, and I don't know, maybe it's just me, but the kind of people that I'm attracted to in a romance are not the perfect princely types. I like a Kylo Ren, okay? I like a Draco. I don't like a little blonde prince. So maybe that was part of the disappointment for me, but it just didn't measure up to my high expectations. And my last book in this category is Conversation with Friends by Sally Rooney. I rated this book 4 stars. I do not think it's a bad book at all. I actually think it's pretty freaking great. The issue that I had is that when I read Normal People by Sally Rooney, I was blown away. I loved it so much. I still think about that book. It affected me on a deeper emotional level than many romances do. It just felt so viscerally real, and I was looking to recreate that feeling in this book, and it just didn't quite hit like Normal People did for me, and a lot of the elements of the story felt really similar to Normal People, to the point that I was like, okay, is she just going for the same gag again, but half-baked? Oh my god, I'm so sorry. That is a really harsh critique. It's a good book, but I think if you've read Normal People first, like I did, it will definitely not hit as hard and maybe be disappointing to you as well.
I'm just trying to be honest. Please don't cancel me. All these books are fine. If you love them, I'm happy for you, but this is my opinion.
And this last category of disappointing reads are books that I went into with kind of open expectations, and something just fell apart where I was like reading this and I was like, this is bad. Yeah, this is bad. So we're gonna start with A Familiar Stranger by A.R. Torre. Y'all know I love A.R. Torre, so it is such a huge disappointment that she is on this list. She's written some of my favorite books, some of my top books of all time, some of my favorite thrillers of last year, but unfortunately, her 2022 release just did not hit for me. A Familiar Stranger follows... God damn, I can't even remember the premise. All I remember about this book is the horrid twist that takes place halfway through and completely took me out of the book. I remember these characters having no depth, the plot completely falling apart, and that twist just not hitting at all, which was so disappointing because, again, like I've said, I love A.R. Torre so much. Oh my god, okay, I just remembered the plot. So this is following a woman who, when she meets people, she has this like weird moment of panic where she just introduces herself as a different person and pretends to have this other life, and that can cause some real problems when she starts getting to know these people and making long-term connections with them, because they think she has this other life than she really does. So she gets herself into a situation where she's living a double life, and she basically has her real life that's kind of going down the tubes, and then this fake life that this guy knows about who she starts building this relationship with, but that life is completely false, and she's caught in between them. a murder happens, a thriller plot unfolds from there, but I think it's just really poorly done, and it was so disappointing to read that from one of my favorite authors. The next book we have in this category is Exquisite Corpse by Poppy Z. Bright, and this one was hyped up so much for me. I kind of thought going in that I would have some reservations because it is published quite a while ago, and it does feature mostly male perspectives, which I know that me reading from a male identifying perspective is not going to go well. It's going to be hard for me to identify with the main character, and there's always that off chance for me that I'm going to feel misogynistic energy that's going to really put me off from connecting with the book. And that is exactly what happened, which was very disappointing because I know that this book is so beloved in the horror community, in particular the offshoot of extreme horror, which I identify as an extreme horror lover. I have loved so many books in that subgenre, and a lot of them are my favorites of all time, but this one just did not come through for me. We are following these two serial killers who separately are their own killer career criminal people, and they end up meeting up, their paths converge, and then they start this romance and they kill together, which that sounds so exciting, but I don't know how somehow that plot was so boring. Like, first of all, they don't meet up and start that journey together until a big chunk into the book. I think like 60 to 70% into the book. So that was already a disappointment. But then I just started feeling like I wasn't connected to the characters at all, and I couldn't root for them because this deeply rooted misogyny came through for me, even though we were following mostly queer characters. So that really took me off guard. And I was just so disappointed because I really wanted to hop on the Exquisite Corpse train, but I just couldn't. Between the boring, the misogyny, the lack of connection between the characters, the plot coming in super late, and the last element, which I just realized I didn't even talk about, was this book is said to have like some of the most extreme gore. I didn't feel like it was extreme at all. It actually left me wanting a lot more. So all of that just led up to it being a pretty disappointing read for me. But again, I totally respect this book and what it has done for the horror genre. And if you like this book, I'm so happy for you. I'm actually jealous of you because I wish that I connected with this book like you did. The next disappointing read that just was bad for me was Cheat Day by Liv Strotman. And this is a romance that I don't even know how to go about telling you about it because it is so odd. It's supposed to be a romance about a woman who's cheating on her partner, and we're not sure if the romance is going to be her like having this moral dilemma, being a cheater and like reconnecting with her husband, or falling in love with this new guy. But either way, this main character was so insufferable. I could not stand to read from her perspective. There reached a point where I was like, girl, I'm done with you. I'm so mad at you. You just need to go to therapy and you're beyond anything else. Like, you should not interact with the world in the way that you are until you go to therapy. You are a danger to other people unless you figure out this emotional shit that you have going on. She wasn't unlikable in a fun, good for her, morally gray kind of way. She was just a horrible person. I'm talking like a woman who hates on other women, someone who invalidates other people's mental health because of their own trauma. I had a lot of myriad of issues with this book and this main character specifically. I don't think that we should feel a level of acceptance for people who take their shit out on everyone else. I can have empathy for pretty much any other morally gray character in a book unless they're just an unaware piece of shit, and that's kind of how I felt about this main character. If that was the intention of the book, fine, great, wonderful, but I don't want to read something like that. So it was a big disappointment for me to go into this expecting like romance and then get that. And the last disappointing read on my 2022 list is Clown in a Cornfield 2 by Adam Caesar. This makes me want to cry. It is so crushingly disappointing because I loved the first one, the first Clown in a Cornfield book. I highly recommend. Run out, buy it, read it if you like slashers. It's so amazing. This one did not measure up to my expectations, and I'm sorry, it just wasn't good. It just wasn't good. It was supposed to be a slasher, but like, I feel like nobody got slashed. A lot of this book was just following the aftermath of the massacre that takes place in the first book. And I feel like if another massacre were to happen in this book, that would have been great. It would have been that same kind of like formulaic slasher plot that I love. And the first book is YA, just like this one, but that book went there. Okay, I was impressed. Highly impressed with the level of gore in the first book, and because this one didn't quite measure up, it really disappointed me. I was so ready to love a YA horror book again, especially one in this series, but alas, it did not. I think my biggest issue with this book and why it was so disappointing was the creativity behind the kills in the first book was so wonderful, and this one just had a lot of gun violence, which to me, that's not the type of horror that I think is fun. It's a little too real. It's a little too, this is what's on the news, and it's depressing, and I don't want to read about that in my free time. So that was the thing that didn't quite connect for me, but I'm so disappointed because I wanted to love it so much. And with that, those are going to be all of my most disappointing books of 2022. Hopefully, hearing my take on these, why they disappointed me, will help you either avoid a book that you're like, yeah, I would think that too. Go in with tempered expectations, or maybe you think, yeah, I totally disagree with Hailey on that, so I'm gonna go ahead and pick that one up. Whichever way you landed, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you again to Shortform for sponsoring. Don't forget to click that link down below and check them out. Like this video if you liked it, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and don't forget to go to therapy and read a book this week. I will see you tomorrow in another episode of Vlogmas. Bye!